You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
One of the best in the nation for the class of 2026 has a good standing with Penn State, but is it enough to get him to commit? This is Locked On Nittany Lions. I'm your host, Zach Seyko, and thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Help me welcome him back from the Locked On Podcast Network, the recruiting expert on this network, and that is Brian Smith. And today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Terms and conditions apply. It is a recruiting episode here, and truly a high school recruiting episode. We've discussed a lot about the transfer portal, but now we're back into high school football recruiting as official visit season is upon us. The Elite 11 camp is going to be happening here in just a matter of days. Dia Bell is going to be back up at Penn State's campus and visiting State College and then Penn State for the fourth time. Brian, you've been based out of Florida. You're now based out of Alabama. You covered the SEC. You covered Miami of Florida. So you know Dia Bell pretty well. And since he is the son of former NBA basketball player Raja Bell, and Penn State is certainly a strong candidate to land a commitment from him, even though he is from the state of Florida.
This is not your typical Florida recruit. His dad has taken him on a lot of visits. They got the financial capabilities of doing it. Raja obviously played in the NBA for a long time, the Suns, the Heat, etc. And they're going to make sure they make a good decision for their kid. Dia is not also just an athlete. Like, he's a serious student, very intellectual young man. So I'd imagine that Penn State would be just as good a fit as, say, Miami, Florida State, whatever. So unusual for a Florida kid to be from the background that he is.
And the 2025 class for quarterback certainly hasn't gone that well for Penn State. Again, missing on Matt Zollers. And of course, they have Beckham Kritza committed in the class of 2025. And then there's Malik Washington's, right? It just hasn't exactly gone as planned for James Franklin and the Nittany Lions here. So what better way to start off the 2026 class with a bang? You already got one splash, getting in-state commit Messiah Mickens, who could prove to be a top 50 commit when those rankings are finished. I know we're so far ahead, right? 2025 is not even finished, and we're already looking at 2026. But that's the Penn State's focusing its attention on 2026 in addition to 2025. But Dia Bell is, I don't like looking at ESPN typically for rankings, but Dia Bell is ranked as one of the best players overall in ESPN's rankings, obviously on 3. And his choices are between Penn State, Ohio State, Miami of Florida. When you hear some of those other schools, Brian, and Texas is one of them as well, you say he's not a typical Florida prospect, meaning that he's not going to look for, playing time right away, somewhere where he can develop, where he can learn and actually be the best quarterback at the end of the day. NIL is not going to be the strongest factor. It's not going to be a significant driver here. When you hear those 5 schools, which ones stand out to you the most as far as, hey, they should be in the lead here, and this commitment's going to come soon?
Well, I think Miami, Penn State, Texas kind of roll off the tongue. Obviously, Sider is going to be a part of his recruitment. He's one of the best recruiters in the country. Penn State needs a quarterback. He's at Elite 11 this weekend, so he'll get a look at the campus. Texas, obviously, Sark has got a reputation with signal callers, so that's something to look at. And then Miami's recruiting pretty hard, too, and that's the local school. Those are the 3 that I think. But like Dia, I talked to him not that long ago, him and his dad at an event. Like, there is no, definitive leader that I know of. I mean, maybe they were playing it close to the vest, but they're just legitimately going around looking at the schools and they'll figure it out. So he's been on other visits too. Those are just some of them, but I think Penn State could be the landing spot.
What pitch can Penn State make to him? Because quarterback play hasn't been at least elite. Let's say that. And I know what I've said about Drew Aller. And again, I think he has a chance to be a future top NFL draft pick because he has the intangibles. I think Mike Yurcich, offensive coordinator, has something to, again, do with that. Sean Clifford wasn't great. Obviously, I think he had a strong finish to his career. Drew Aller comes in. He's efficient, but he doesn't wow you. I don't think quarterbacks want to go to a school where they're just going to be efficient, get the job done, be essentially a really good game manager. So how can Penn State and now Andy Kotelnicki at the helm, Danny O'Brien is the quarterback's coach, pitch to Diabell that we're going to buck that trend here and you can be a superstar?
I think the biggest thing for them is quite simple. They got to play well this year. The offense has to take a step forward. It's one thing to say it, it's another to prove it. So even if he committed to Penn State in the summer, if they don't show something in the fall, would he eventually sign with Penn State? I don't know. He's only going to be a junior, but you got to show something in the fall. The other thing is just keep building the relationship. Penn State does a tremendous job as a staff of getting not just the recruit, but the parents involved, coaches, etc. They do a really nice job. Just stay to the course there.
Brian, what do you ultimately like the most about Diabell as a prospect? Because again, when you look at the recruiting rankings, one of the top prospects in Florida, if not the top prospect coming out of Florida, and a consensus top 5 quarterback. Some rankings have him listed at number 2. Most of them have him listed as the second best signal caller in the class of 2026. What would Penn State be getting if they ultimately landed a commitment from him?
I think they're getting a cerebral player. Like, he doesn't just use physical skills and hope it works out.
And rely. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. He figures out leverages, matchups, and he understands protections and things a little bit more advanced for his age. I'm not saying he's a complete prospect, but at the same time, with 2 years of high school to go, he's more advanced. Like, I've known him for a while. He's a kid we knew about, like going in 9th grade. Everybody knew he's going to be a player, that kind of thing. And just following his progress and seeing him play multiple times, it's the same thing over and over with him. He's happy to take the 7-yard pass if you're playing off coverage. He'll just nickel and dime you down the field. But if you come up and play man and want to get aggressive with him, he's got the arm and the understanding of when to throw it, how to look off the safety, to do all those things. So he's advanced. And then the other thing is he's got natural size. He's kind of hit a growth spurt. He's gained 10, 15 pounds in the last 6-8 months. He's up to 200 pounds. He was like 180, 185 last year. He was pretty thin. He's 6'3". He's going to fill out to 220-pound quarterback. So you got the intangibles you're looking for. You got natural size. And then the demeanor, like, he's not an aggressive guy where he has to have it all the time, which you got to play that way sometimes as a quarterback and take the underneath stuff. He has all the things together that you look for to play at a major Power 4 program.
This is somebody that Penn State's going to want a commitment from above all else. What you described in terms of him as a player, in terms of him as a person, and then you could already have 2 faces of your class of 2026 taken care of, 2 headline prospects with Messiah Mickens as your running back, and then potentially Diabell as your quarterback. But Penn State is in the mix for this, so don't look at that. It's just a Florida prospect. He's probably going to go to Ohio State or Texas, Miami of Florida. No, Penn State is truly in the thick of this, and this commitment is sooner rather than later, as he's really pushed it up here, even though he is a junior in the class of 2026. Still to come on this episode, Penn State is looking at some other big-name prospects for the class of 2025. Official visit season is almost upon us. Names like Quincy Porter, Michael Carroll are gaining some traction as far as where they could land. We'll discuss some of those names on the other side of this break. Since this is a recruiting episode, let's talk about the leaders in job recruiting, LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. So I got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you cannot find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. So hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. And LinkedIn understands that small businesses are wearing tons of hats and might not necessarily have all the time in the world to devote to hiring. And LinkedIn is always constantly finding ways to make the process easier and more intuitive. That is why 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Be one of them. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. The class of 2025 is in good standing, but obviously there's always room for improvement. It could be better if you're going to compete with the likes of Ohio State. Now you have USC, right? Oregon. Those schools just continue to. USC went on a hot streak here. Oregon it seems to be always one of the better schools in the recruiting rankings now. So you just have to deal with that. Even though they are on the West Coast, they're in the Big Ten. They're right there against you. And if Penn State's going to do that, if they're going to continue to stay in the upper echelon, they need players like Quincy Porter. Michael Carroll's an offensive lineman, legacy player, potential commit in the state of Pennsylvania, has continually gone up through the rankings. Originally, when he kind of made his way onto the scene as just a prospect and started gaining some traction, hey, there's potential here. And I said he ultimately could be easily one of the best prospects in Pennsylvania. Now he's getting the recognition as a top offensive lineman in the entire country. I want to begin with Quincy Porter, though, because, Brian, we know the problems that are there at receiver. Penn State cracks his top 6. He's going to go, Penn State's going up against the likes of Ohio State, Michigan, go figure, right? Other big name Big Ten schools. Out of the state of New Jersey, can Penn State actually land who could arguably be one of the best wide receiver prospects in the class of 2025?
They've got to get these kind of kids if they're going to get to where they need to be. New Jersey player, 6'3", 190, can really run, gets off bump coverage well. This is the kid that Joe Pa would have gotten. This is the kid that Penn State needs to get if they're going to get back to that consistency on offense. So I don't know if they're going to get him. He's taken quite a few visits this summer. But if Penn State wants to win big, New Jersey is vital. This is one of the most important kids on the board, regardless of position.
I would say it's going to be one of their more difficult recruitments because, again, of what they're going up against. And we've talked about it tons and tons of time, that nothing has been shown at wide receiver. Not since Jahan Dotson was there, even with Parker Washington, Mitchell Tinsley. That was the best showcase of it. But that's still fairly pedestrian, and that's so long. Quincy Porter's not sitting there thinking about, well, this is what they did with Parker Washington and Mitchell Tinsley, so therefore, I'm in good standing. That was a different wide receivers coach. That was a different offense. That was a different season. And with Marcus Higgins, who has been there now, again, he's a veteran. He's not exactly new anymore. Like he's established. Okay, there's still a lot of cleaning up to do here. But none of that matters, and that's my point. So Quincy Porter's going to look down the list here and say, look at what Ohio State continues to do. And that's what Penn State's going up against. So again, what the pitch that I would make to Quincy Porter is that you can play right away. You can be, you can like a Cam Coleman. Again, you're covering Auburn extensively. Like a Cam Coleman, I know he's a 5-star, and I would put Cam Coleman in a different tier. Like he's a generational type of prospect compared to Quincy Porter. I think Quincy Porter is really, really good and one of the best in the country. But when we're talking, best of the best over the past 5 or 10 years, that conversation's designated for Cam Coleman. But Quincy Porter isn't too far behind, but he's behind. But my point is, a player like Porter could come in and instantly become a number 2 in the rotation.
Sure.
Could you make the pitch that he could come in and be the number 1, right? That's what I'm saying. At 6'3", nearly 200 pounds, one of the best prospects, again, across the country for this class of 2025, you're going to have to make a pitch like that and just kind of take that risk.
Sometimes you've got to find a different angle. Penn State obviously had a lot of receivers on their roster recently, but how many of them had the measurables that Quincy has? How many of them have the speed, the elusiveness, the ability to get off press coverage? Not many. And if nothing else, again, it's a local kid because Penn State's always recruited Jersey hard, and it's a guy that you don't want playing at your rivals. This has so many implications. You're going to play. I mean, we brought in a guy that understands the passing game. Let's figure this out. Why can't you be our guy? There's still plenty of plays for Penn State here, and they've done a good job with their OBs for years. That's not any surprise. Franklin does a good job with that.
Yes.
I think they're more of a player than other teams, but again, you still got to prove to me you're going to get a guy at receiver over Ohio State. I always pick Ohio State in these situations because it's the low-hanging fruit. Sue me, but I'm not stupid. So Penn State's going to have to come up with something that it's going to wow this kid.
His final 6, Ohio State, Texas A&M, Michigan, Penn State, Oklahoma, Alabama. We talked about the type of competition it would be to land Diabell. And again, there's more time to that since it's a 2026 prospect. This is as tough as it gets for Penn State going up against those kinds of schools. Let's pivot back to Michael Carroll because you've recently watched some of his film just to check up on him for this episode. He's one of the best prospects in all of Pennsylvania. On3 has him as the number 2 interior offensive lineman, and he fits the bill.
Yeah, that kid, his first step, man, I was like over and over again. This young man gets off the football, gets his hands on somebody, and he's massive. Moves him out of the way. But it was the first step quickness. You can do something with a frame like that, even if he's not elite athletically. But when you add the quickness, he can play guard or tackle. He'd be good to go. Doesn't matter. Those are the kinds of kids athletically Bama and Georgia and LSU have gotten the last 15 years. And, they've done quite well. There's the situation again. If you can get these kids, or there's not as many of these guys in like PA, New Jersey, or down south. If you want to compete with those schools, you got to win here. This kid is good. He's underrated by the rankings. And I think this is at least talent-wise, is a top 100 guy because not many guys in the 300-pound range can move like this. Really, really talented young man.
I figured that this would be Penn State's recruitment to lose because, again, he is a legacy. He's currently in the state of Pennsylvania. Penn State's had a head start on his recruitment, but then Michigan, Alabama, Georgia, Rutgers is in there as well. But then it's when SEC country gets involved because we've seen in the past, and we've talked about it on the show, Brian, when there is particularly Georgia. Now, Fran Brown's away. He's at Syracuse, and I don't see Syracuse making a strong push here. They ultimately could just because of the presence of Fran Brown as its head coach. But Georgia was always that one to kind of sneak in and get a recruit that Penn State should have had. And now, but here's the case with Matt Zollers. Okay, so that was in Georgia, but Missouri kind of sneaks into Pennsylvania and takes a top prospect here. Georgia and Alabama making a strong push for him as well. It sounds like I would say that really the head-to-head battle is Penn State and Michigan, but then there's that allure of going to SEC country.
This is the new age of recruiting.
Mm-hmm.
I know certain coaches at certain programs, they have high school coaches in their state that are mad that the big state U school doesn't recruit locally as much anymore. It's like the draft. They don't care if you're from a traditionally smaller program like Grambling or something like that, but has players, or if you're at Alabama. Are you a player? The need is to win now, so they go out of state, etc. And this is an example of it. When I was growing up, the kids in PA went to about 4 schools. It won't surprise anybody. Penn State, maybe 5. Penn State, Pittsburgh, Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame. That was pretty much it. Occasionally, a kid might have went to Tennessee or something random like that. But 9 out of 10 times, it was one of those 5 schools if they were an elite player. That was it. Those days are over. Alabama gets kids out of there. Georgia's gotten some Philadelphia kids. And it's just not as much state loyalty. This one would hurt more, though, in my eyes, for 2 reasons. Again, not as many elite linemen and PAs are used to. There's still some good ones. Mm-hmm. So it's an important position. And the legacy factor, that stings a little bit if you don't get that young man.
Absolutely. So that's the offensive side of it. Defensive end, linebacker, those positions could be heating up for Penn State in this class of 2025 cycle. We'll finish with just that on the other side of this break. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Gear up for the ultimate NBA and NHL showdowns in the playoffs as FanDuel is welcoming new customers with the golden opportunity, $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's right. You get $150 just by winning a $5 bet. A whopping $150 to play on spreads, money lines, player props, and so much more. So don't miss out on this exclusive offer. All you got to do is head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and seize your chance to turn every playoff moment into a victory. And with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, the thrill never stops. Join the winning team today and experience the excitement like never before. Elevate your game, make every shot count, and dominate the playoffs with FanDuel. That's FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Penn State is ultimately pushing for that fourth linebacker commitment. Now, there's some elements to it, and Brian, you and I have discussed already that DJ McClary would be a flip target by other local schools, whether that's Rutgers. I think a strong contender is Syracuse. He had a really good relationship with Manny Diaz. Manny Diaz is no longer there. But part of that is Deshaun Burnett, who is a linebacker commit, probably projects more as an edge, as a defensive end at the end of the day, just because of how good he is attacking the line of scrimmage and getting after the quarterback. He's just a versatile athlete, but it seems like he's more of a defensive end. So there is a need for linebacker. Two of them are Florida prospects that are the best of the best. And I want to start with Ty Jackson, because Ty Jackson is the #1 linebacker prospect according to On3, ESPN. He goes to Seminole Ridge High School. He's listed at 6'1.5", roughly, over 200 pounds, and he would instantly be the best linebacker commit out of all the other possibilities too. If Penn State were to land Ty Jackson, he would be the best linebacker, maybe even the best. I would say the best defensive overall recruit in this class of 2025 if they could land him. They're certainly in the mix, strongly in the mix.
He's a South Florida kid, and once again, Juwan Sider is involved. And this is a guy that is kind of if you think back more to my era growing up, a Florida State Miami linebacker, a little undersized, but can really run. And this kid's put together like a boxer. Like he's an athlete.
Yeah.
I don't care what spot you play him at, the overhang / nickel spot, will linebacker, blitzing him off the edge on 3rd and 6. Ty Jackson's what you're looking for. And he hits with a lot of power. He brings his hips when he finds a ball carrier, and he's athletic enough to cover in some ways like a safety. So he brings 3-down linebacker ability to your defense too. Some have him as the top linebacker in the country, and for good reason. Ty Jackson is a dude.
Elijah Melendez is another one of those names out of the state of Florida, and I think that fourth linebacker commit is important. I think McClary will stay. Again, it's ultimately going to turn into 3 linebacker commits because of what is ahead for the likes of Deshaun Burnett. Never say never of him playing linebacker, but again, just what they could do with him at defensive end. And then there's Elijah Melendez. Now, this is a little different because he another Florida area prospect. He's committed to Miami of Florida, but Penn State hasn't given up on his recruitment. And for good reason. I think you would agree, Brian, just because he's committed to the Hurricanes doesn't exactly mean everything until he signs on the dotted line here.
He's taken a lot of visits. Florida, Michigan, Penn State, etc. He's been all over the place. Really athletic. Another kid, when he takes his shirt off, he's put in time and he's gifted. Could play inside backer, could play outside, and he's a thumper. Really strong for his age. 225-ish, give or take. Could play middle, could play weak side, whatever. I have no idea where he's going to end up. I've heard other people behind the scenes have told me where they thought, and I'm like, okay, well, how do you explain all the visits? I mean, how do you just pick one school right now? I'm not sure Elijah knows, but Penn State's been one of the schools after him, and he's one of the best players in the state of Florida.
Ty Jackson is still the preference. And again, Penn State's in better standing with him, at least if you have an early, crystal ball, if you will, even though nothing's set in stone. Penn State is actually just technically leading for him based on the amount of visits and contact that Penn State has been able to make with Ty Jackson. And then another one, I think everyone's going to recognize his name very well, and probably the most likely of them, just because LaVar Arrington II. Well, we know what his father was able to do when he was a linebacker at Penn State and the impact that he had. LaVar Arrington II, not the same kind of caliber, at least not right now. I can't say that he won't develop into a quality linebacker prospect, but don't think just because, he's LaVar Arrington's son, that he's going to be one of the best linebackers in Penn State history. He, in terms of what he showcased right now at the high school level, is further behind than what Ty Jackson and Elijah Melendez, and any of them that Penn State has. Alex Tatch, Deshaun Burnett, DJ McClary, you name any of the linebackers, they're further ahead of LaVar Arrington II, but it would still be a nice commitment for the Nittany Lions, even aside from the legacy factor of it.
Hey, if you can get players like that, whether they're legacy or not, you got to be happy. Legacy part's a bonus. Penn State should never struggle at linebacker either. Just going to throw that out there. When I grew up, they always had backers. So Penn State's defense was arguably the best in the nation last year. They got plenty to sell, my friend.
That is Brian Smith over on the other side, recruiting expert for the Locked On Podcast Network. Brian, thanks so much for the time. And Elite 11 is coming up here, official visit season. With June is going to be full-fledged recruiting, so we're going to have a lot of good conversations on the way about all of this, and I can't wait for it.
Thank you very much, sir. Looking forward to it as myself.
Once again, thanks so much for checking out this episode of Locked On Nittany Lions. If you enjoyed the conversation, leave a like on the show, share it with friends and family. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section about where Penn State stands with its football recruiting. And if you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams. And don't forget, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows covering each and every league. You can find Locked On Sports Today now available on YouTube and the free Fire TV channels app.